Shalom, family. This is Brother Daryl, and today we'll be discussing true Israel and why their identity matters. There are a lot of lies in the world, and we'll do our part to go ahead and dispel them today. Let's tackle why the identity of the Israelites matters first. Okay? Yahweh has not, nor will he ever abandon his chosen people. And let's grab a couple of biblical precepts to prove that point. Psalms 14, verse 4. For Yahweh will not cast off his people, neither will he forsake his inheritance. Romans 11, verse 1. This is the Apostle Paul speaking. I say then, hath God cast away his people? God forbid. For I also am an Israelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Replacement theology is believing that Israel no longer matters because the Gentile Christian church has now somehow become Israel. This is an extremely dangerous ideology. Why? Because you risk being cut off yourself when you adopt it. Read Romans 11 verses 18 through 24 to gain a thorough understanding of this. Paul refers to it as boasting against the natural branches. If you think that Israel was cut off just so that you could be grafted in as Israel, you're completely missing the point. Okay, let's move on. Another very important reason why the identity of the true Israelites matters is because some very scary prophecies have been pronounced over those found guilty of oppressing them. Here's a sample. Isaiah chapter 49, verse 26. Keep in mind that this is an end times prophecy. This is Yahweh speaking. And I will feed them that oppress thee with their own flesh, and they shall be drunken with their own blood, as with sweet wine. And all flesh shall know that I, Yahweh, am thy Savior and thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. There's also this, Isaiah chapter 14, verses 1 through 2. Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob and will still choose Israel and settle them in their own land. The strangers will be joined with them and they will cling to the house of Jacob. Then people will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them for servants and maids in the land of Yahweh. They will take them captive, whose captives they were, and will rule over their oppressors. So whoever the true Israelites are, in the last days, they will be held captive and they will be oppressed. They will not be ruling over the world and commanding all the banking of the world. Keep that in mind. So to wrap this portion of our presentation up, understand that the real Israelites matter, and you will be doing yourself a major favor by blessing them instead of cursing them. Let's move forward into how the actual Israelites looked. The first key to understanding who the Israelites are is to understand what the ancient Egyptians looked like. Throughout the scriptures, Israelites are constantly mistaken for the ancient Egyptians. Quick note here. Do not make the mistake of thinking that the modern Arabs who currently dominate the region are the same as the ancient Egyptians who ruled Egypt during the time of Moses. Keep in mind that Egypt has changed hands several times since the time of the Exodus. It was conquered by the Persians, then by the Greeks under Alexander the Great, then by the Romans. It remained in European control until it was finally conquered by the Arabs in the 7th century AD. And those same Muslim Arabs are the majority in Egypt to this day. For the sake of our discussion, we'll focus on how the ancient Egyptians looked, as they were the ones who resembled the true Israelites. So let's go to the scriptures. In Genesis chapter 42, verses 7 and verses 8, you'll see that Joseph, upon his reunion with his brothers, was not actually recognized by his brothers. And that's because He looked just like an Egyptian to them. Going into Moses in the book of Exodus, you can go to chapter 2, verse 19, and you can see that Moses is called an Egyptian by the Midianites. You can go all the way to the New Testament and see that Paul is also confused as an Egyptian. He's asked by the Egyptian commander if he is an Egyptian. Okay, so clearly the true Israelites bear a strong resemblance to the ancient Egyptians, who are descendants of Ham, according to Genesis 10:6. Now look at Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. Apparently, the ancient Egyptians were descendants of Ham, who was the progenitor of the dark races, with the exception of these mysterious Negroes. So apparently the Negroes resemble Hamites, but do not belong to that bloodline, just like the biblical Israelites. We'll get back to that in just a bit. Take a look at this mural of Egyptian women. This was painted by the ancient Egyptians themselves. Notice the dark skin, thick lips, and woolly hair. Well, that's exactly how Herodotus described the ancient Egyptians in his book, The Histories, book number 2, page 104. Thick lips, broad noses, woolly hair, and they are burnt of skin. Take a look at this bust of Queen Ty here. This bust was made by the ancient Egyptians. Moses is believed to have lived from 1391 to 1271 BC. Moses was raised with the royal family, which means that he would have resembled them. He would have had to have blended in. This isn't rocket science, family. This woman looks like Michelle Obama with a fro. Here's a statue of King Tut, the grandson of Queen Ty. Notice how they painted his skin jet black? Well, let's connect some dots and understand that this is how Moses would have looked. So let's go back to the scriptures and see how the Israelites describe themselves. Job 30:30. My skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. Lamentations chapter 5, verse 10. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. White people do not turn black when they get sick or suffer malnutrition. Quite the opposite, in fact. They become pale. This is common sense right here. Let's go into the Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 5. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. This is Solomon's lover describing herself. The Messiah is also described as being a black man in the book of Revelation, chapter 1, verses 14 through 15. White woolly hair, feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace. This is a dark complected man, family. This white Jesus that you've seen depicted all over the world, well, that's Cesare Borgia, the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI. Leonardo da Vinci painted him as the Messiah because they believed that a picture of a white Messiah would be more palatable to the world. This is during the time of the Renaissance. Basically the birth of what we now call white supremacy. So it's time to wake up. The Messiah never looked like this. We've now clearly established that the real Israelites are black. However, there are many black people across the earth. We need to actually narrow it down. The true chosen people are actually marked by a series of curious prophetic curses that not enough people are aware of. And these curses come as a result of the Israelites breaking the agreement that they made with Yahweh at the foot of Mount Sinai. Moses read the covenant to them. and they agreed. The agreement was sealed in blood that made it eternal. Again, this is an agreement that the Israelites violated. Let's grab a quick precept from the book of Daniel to prove that the true Israelites suffer under the curses pronounced in the law of Moses because they violated the covenant. Daniel chapter 9 verse 11 reads, "Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him." The curse that Daniel is talking about is contained in Deuteronomy 28 as well as in Leviticus 26. I highly recommend that you read the entire chapter in both of these books. Okay, Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26. We're about to dive into this prophetic curse and demonstrate how it marks the true chosen people. Once you understand this, it becomes impossible to be deceived about the identity of the true Israelites. We're going to jump around through various portions of these two prophetic chapters, and we'll use the scriptures to weave a sort of prophetic quilt that identifies who the real Israelites are. Let's go ahead and get into it. Deuteronomy 28 verse 15 reads, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." So these curses are Yahweh's legal remedy for breaking the covenant that was sealed at the foot of Mount Sinai. And the word covenant is just a fancy word that means contract or agreement. Deuteronomy 28 verse 45 reads, "Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee and shall pursue thee and overtake thee till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee." Verse 46, "And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever." So these curses are decreed to follow the Israelites wherever they go, and they would serve as a sign of who they are and that their God is very real and very alive. These curses serve as a witness to the world that the scriptures are true. So whether you're an Israelite or a Gentile, it's important that you understand these curses so that you understand that they're proof that the scriptures are real. So the first marker of who the Israelites are, let's go ahead and read Deuteronomy 28 verses 47 and 48. "Because thou servest not Yahweh thy Elohim with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which Yahweh shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thee until he have destroyed thee." So we see here that Israel will be made to serve their enemies in dire poverty, and they would wear yokes of iron until they were destroyed as a people. This was all fulfilled through the slave trade. Moving forward with another key marker. Deuteronomy 28 verse 64. "And Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even gods of wood and stone." So the scattering of Israel was also fulfilled in the slave trade. Right about now, you're probably wondering which false gods they be made to serve. Well, that would be the false god of Roman Christianity, as well as the false god of Islam. Moving forward, the next marker, Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 30. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Negro slaves were routinely raped by their masters. Slaves built the White House as well as the houses of many other plantation owners. Mass's house, the big house. Yeah, the Negroes built them and they never lived therein. Slaves worked the fields but never benefited from the fruits of their labor, fulfilling that curse. Another marker, Deuteronomy 28, verse 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Verse 41. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. Families were routinely broken up during slavery due to slaves being sold off. Another key marker. Yahweh shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth. A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. And that's Deuteronomy 28, verses 49 through 50. The enemies of Israel would show them absolutely no pity. It is no coincidence that the imagery of the eagle was used in the description of these enemies. So when you hear about blacks in America being abducted, shot down in the street by cops, or poisoned by lead and tap water in Michigan, remember this verse out of Leviticus chapter 26, verse 38. And you shall perish among the heathen, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. So let's move forward to what is probably the nail in the coffin for the argument as to who the true Israelites are. Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. And Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. When it says that no man shall buy you, it means that no man would redeem you from slavery. The word Egypt, as used in the Bible, is synonymous with bondage or slavery. So the Israelites were prophesied to go back into slavery by way of ship. And it's clear to see that America represents spiritual Egypt, though the Israelites have been scattered to the four winds in their final captivity. Okay, their identity was also prophesied to cease to be remembered by men in the Song of Moses. That's in Deuteronomy 32:26. So at this point, we're asking ourselves, well, how did the Israelites go from being in Israel during the time of the Messiah to being in Africa? We have to understand what happened to them. How in the world did they get there? Well, that's covered in Rudolph Windsor's book, From Babylon to Timbuktu. It is an excellent read. I highly recommend that you get your hands on this book. Page 84 reads, in 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. Okay? So the real Israelites fled into Africa where they could hide after the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And this fulfills the prophecy in Luke 21:24, which reads, "And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." So the Israelites fled and settled throughout the whole of Africa, but particularly in West Africa, a place that the Europeans later came to call Negro Land. Negro Land? Well, remember what the comments said about Ham in Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary. Remember when these Bible scholars excluded the Negroes from being the descendants of Ham? Well, now you know why. Those Negroes come from Shem. They're the real Israelites who were taken from the shores of Africa and scattered all over the world in fulfillment of the prophecies contained in the law of Moses. Again, these prophecies are detailed in Deuteronomy chapter 28 as well as Leviticus chapter 26. Trust the Bible about the identity of the true Israelites. Do not trust men. Men lie. Speaking of false doctrine, now that you know the truth, you should learn about the laws contained in Torah. Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. Those laws were never done away with, like the Christian church tries to teach you. It's time to come to an understanding that the only laws that were done away with are those pertaining to animal sacrifice. Yeshua came to be a suffering servant and to give his life as a ransom for many. He is the eternal sin offering to reconcile us to the Father. But those laws, again, the ones pertaining to animal sacrifice, those are the only ones that were done away with. So repent, return to the law, and understand that Yeshua is returning to deliver his people and to fulfill his vengeance upon everyone foolish enough to have oppressed them. Shalom to you, family, and thank you so much for your time. See you next video.